I love you, sweetheart. Have a good time.
Hello, testing. Okay, oh, we're going to start in just a minute, everybody. Okay, shall we begin? Oh. I am. Okay. Okay, yeah. So, what's that? We're live? Okay, oh, wonderful. Okay. Hello, everyone. Welcome. We're going to start now. Well, thank you for being here. Please take a moment to turn off your cell phones. I'm the interim gallery director at Hamden Gallery, which is part of the Fine Arts Center at the University of Massachusetts Amherst. Hamden Gallery shows artists at all different stages in their art careers and is known as a launching pad for emerging artists. Our programming runs throughout the academic year, and we have expanded our programming to include online exhibitions and talks. Visit our website to see current exhibitions by Eric Reinman and Nanette Vonnegut. For Hamden Gallery's on-campus exhibitions, Peter Dellert's work can be seen at the Sculpture Garden for this semester outside the Hamden building. However, while renovations take place inside the building, we have decided to have a pop-up gallery space in Bartlett Hall. Margie Roderick's work can be seen in the incubator space in Bartlett, and Alan Fortescue's work is in the main gallery in Bartlett. And he is here today to give us an artist talk. Alan received a BA in English from the University of Massachusetts in 1991. He spent much time here in Bartlett, and now he has returned to exhibit his art. I'm so delighted to have Alan's work in the gallery. Since the show has been up, I've loved watching people come in and view his work. I see their eyes light up as they look around the room. They are truly impressed, as am I, by his oil paintings that are so skillfully and beautifully painted. They're deeply moving and thought-provoking. I look forward to learning more about the work from Alan in his artist talk today. People are welcome to ask questions at the end of the talk. And I just welcome Alan. Thank you so much.
I just want to take a quick moment actually to thank you, Sally, for your interest in my work and all of your hard work in helping me put this show up. Really appreciate it. Thank you very much. And thank you, all of you who have come here in person or whether you're joining us on the live stream at home. It's great to have you here on this February afternoon. Thank you very much for being here. I am 4. I'm playing with my plastic toy cowboy set in the lower level of my home in Colorado. We have no basement, so this is the bottom floor to the house, which sits on a concrete slab. It's also the kids' level. My 3 older brothers and I all have our rooms in this space, as well as a large family rec room where there was a sofa for watching TV and a carpeted play space. I'm playing upon this play space with my cowboys. In my hands at this moment is a horseless, old-fashioned, red-brown stagecoach. It is meant to have small plastic horses attached to it, horses to pull it along. However, these have become unattached and their whereabouts has long been unknown. I have at my disposal a handful of small plastic cowboys who are frozen in action poses. The best ones are the ones that have their pistols drawn and are in the act of shooting, arms out, aim deadly straight. The next best are the riflemen, erect, rifle primed for the kill. The worst ones are the ones that just seem to be standing there, action undetermined. These are the ones who usually get shot first or get relegated to riding horses or sneaking up behind armed cowboys to try and take them from behind. I remember one cowboy more than most. He was more rubbery than plastic, and his clothes were better defined in that they were colored as if real. Unlike the many other monotone or fully plastic men, he had a white hat bent up at both sides, a tan shirt with a red bandana tied around his neck. Over this, he wore a light green jacket that had this sense of being made from some kind of fine material like suede. He felt like a dapper cowboy. In fact, there was something educated and refined about his being. Here was a cowboy who could wrangle out on the range, but return home to his ranch and eat a 4-course dinner with the governor. His pants were dark tan, his boots chocolate brown. Most notable about him was his pose and what he carried in his hands. He stood straight up, but sideways, as a duelist might turn sideways when facing his opponent so as to minimize his exposure to the fray. In his right hand, he carried his 6-shooter, arm up in excellent action. In his left hand, which is behind him and to the side, he carries a green-style carpet bag. I don't know why, but I always imagined there was money in that bag. Often he played the role of the gentleman bank robber, or a robber of some kind. Accordingly, he was also always infinitely in the act of the getaway, shooting his way out of trouble, out of town, out of everywhere he would ever go. But there are no cowboys in my hand at the moment. They're all stacked behind me in a pile. All my attention as I sit on the carpeted floor in our large, flat play area, a play space that my mother had recently cleaned and vacuumed of all clutter, is on the stagecoach. I'm slowly rolling it along as it goes on its way on some unknown destination. It's on its 4 wheels. It moves easily. In my play, it has hit a bump, a tree limb come down from a storm, causing me to roll the stagecoach onto its side. Oddly, very oddly, when I write the stagecoach, which has not been out of sight or my control for a moment, one of the wheels from the side that was on the carpet is missing. Even now, decades later, I can recall being deeply perplexed by this impossibility. I had not been wildly rolling or throwing the stagecoach around. Rather, when it rolled over, I merely slowly, with my hands, turned it on its side. And now turning it back up, one of the wheels, the size of a silver dollar, has not only come off, but is missing. Not wanting my toy to be ruined, I scanned the carpet, a carpet thick enough to have prevented any sort of runaway wheel, but not thick enough to have hidden it. And I do not see the wheel. Determined, I scanned for a while, looking around me in full circle. Nothing. I look at my legs and socks and pants. I slowly stand and look under me. I turn around. I walk around in a widening gyre. I look where the wheel might have inconceivably rolled. The wheel was gone, disappeared. And as I recount this story, I can feel how others would speculate that as a child, I simply did not have the wherewithal to figure out where it had rolled, that I had simply been distracted and not seen it wand its way somewhere nearby. But I know this not to be the case. I would stake my life on it. This event changed me forever. To this day, I'm plagued by the question. And in fact, in many ways, this question has become essential to my existence. Where did the wheel go? How could it have just disappeared? What did this mean that it disappeared? What does this mean about the existence of things? What does this mean about my existence? Do I exist? Young children learn about existing by casting off their favorite object only to reclaim it a moment later. They learn, you are not me, and because you are not me, there is a universe out there that is not me too. And when the object is destroyed by its casting off, a child can take it back and reclaim the universe as someone within it. But if the universe reaches out and takes something from you and returns only mystery, what then are we left with? Rather than a failure of Fort Da, is there some kind of access to some kind of other reality? Did the wheel transport into some other dimension? The world becoming a kind of unreliable space with invisible, uncontrollable doors that lead out to other universes that exist without you? And this creates a sense that you're trapped in here, in some simulacra of a larger existence, where all is suddenly illusion. And you think, what if all of humanity, those that have cast off and reclaimed their objects, live in an even smaller and closed-off reality? One unaware of a multiverse, one in which they are unaware of the fact that being is all an illusion. What then? I begin with this story because, to me, the impossibility of the mystery within it is a good metaphor for how it feels to talk about one's artistic practice. Trying to express the enormity of what it means to make meaning for me, or what I hope to convey through my art, feels like trying to account for where the wheel from my stagecoach went. Writing this talk, I could begin a narrative to explain how I carve out what it means to make meaning, but I could never find a way to a satisfactory ending that did anything other than invalidate the very things I was trying to say. On the one hand, the history of what goes into my work is too long of a story, one that considerably predates my life, and one not even translatable into words. And on the other hand, what I think about my work ultimately doesn't matter. Its life outside of me depends upon what you think, how you, the viewer, understands it and feels about it from your own unmeasurable and untranslatable life experiences. And yet here we are, you with curiosity and me with the desire to express. And so we enter the middle ground, that singular space where we try to synchronize experiences, ideas, and perceptions, as we always do, with imperfectness and with story. So with that in mind, I conceived of this talk as a series of 5 vignettes, or entry points into a conversation about the concepts and complexities of our existence that shape my expression. First vignette. What does it mean to interpret someone's artwork? What do you give of yourself in this act? And what do you take away? What happens to you when you think you know what something means? And what is the role of all that remains in mystery, unknowable? For me, one of the most fascinating works of art, though perhaps it was not conceived of this way, are the images on the golden records sent out into space on Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, humanity's first deep space probes launched into space some 40 plus years ago. On the one side of these records are recordings of the human voice, are many languages from around the world, music from around the world. But on the other side are these images. Ostensibly, these are pictographic instructions on how to play the records, as well as a kind of star map that was designed to help would-be aliens find Earth, depending on when and where, and of course, if they're ever found. What fascinates me about these images is trying to imagine how some alien civilization, some civilization with absolutely no understanding of humankind, would interpret these. Would these be interpreted in a way that would unlock our humanity to them? Would they be read wrongly and understood to mean something we never intended? Or would they be an ever-enticing mystery eluding interpretation? I mean, even for us here, had you not just seen these and I told you what they were, you might never have been able to interpret them. Oops. But then, more likely than not, these records may be missed altogether, as even now, as we sit here, Voyager 1 and Voyager 2 are still hurtling through interstellar space into the great unknown, into the truly unfathomable endlessness of space-time. And have you considered this? I mean, truly stopped and wondered about the immensity of it all? At conventional speeds, our fastest rockets would take 78,000 years to reach our closest stellar neighbor, which is 4 light years away. A light year being a measure of time, distance, and speed, or how far you would travel in 1 year, traveling at the speed of light, which is 186,000 miles per second. Imagine that our galaxy, a spiral around which our sun and solar system rotates, is some 200,000 of these light years across. A journey that, if we were to take it, would take us almost 4 billion years to make at traveling at conventional speeds. And to think of our universe of unknown size, but in which we have seen objects as far away as 13.4 billion light years. And to think in all of this space and time, and to the best of our knowledge and research, and in the light of recent astronomical observation of exoplanets and the monitoring of alien communications ongoing now for 80 years, not to mention even just the challenge of creating a habitable world, it appears possible, and to some astronomers even probable, that we are completely and utterly alone in all of creation. What of that? Surely, if true, this means something profound. Are we something incredibly rare after all? This gift of life, this one chance at sentience, of awareness of our awareness, of awareness of the mystery. This rare opportunity to feel, hear music, see beauty. There's a video made by several famous astrophysicists that says, despite the fact that the universe will likely exist for another, and bear with me, this is a large number, 4,000 trillion, 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 trillion years, the opportunity for life as we understand it is only possible for 1,000th of a billion, 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 billionth of a percent. What if we are that opportunity? We could be. It could be so. What extends from that? What opportunity? What responsibility? Vignette number 2. My paintings are often inspired by the moment. I'm walking along one day and boom, I see something and I know, yes, that is a painting. It has that thing, whatever that thing is that I needed to say. But it doesn't stop there. I'll collect that image or that thing with a photograph, with a sketch collected in my mind, and I'll do a master underdrawing with it. Each painting I do starts with a master underdrawing that is a detailed work of the tonal form, the shape, the shadow, and the notations for even the most subtle of color variations and color gradations, as you can see here on the underdrawing for my painting, Empire. A drawing that will receive a layer of red vermilion as I start to build out the color structure. And as I sit to draw, say with Mahler Symphony 2 playing, other things come. Words, memories, feelings. things from within me and things from without. I recall when painting Empire, taken from a real-life scene one day in Chicago, the Rilke poem, The Panther, came to me, and it reminded me of a lecture given by the South African artist William Kentridge about the essence of this panther, caged in a zoo, pacing back and forth into madness, a creature of deep intelligence and wild beauty, destroyed body and soul for our entertainment, as the poem reads. His vision from the constantly passing bars has grown so weary that it cannot hold anything else. It seems to him there are 1,000 bars, and behind the bars, no world. As he paces in cramped circles over and over, the movement of his powerful soft strides is like a ritual dance around a center in which a mighty will stands paralyzed. Only at times, the curtains of the pupils lifts quietly. An image enters in, rushes down through the tensed, arrested muscles, plunges into the heart, and is gone. I wanted to paint this poem into Empire, as I found it deeply resonant with my plight, with the human plight. And I did paint it into the painting. There was a section here where I sought to replace the advertisement for United Airlines. But the poem, once painted in, looked horrible, and I had to scrape it off and instead offer you infinity. And infinity, I did not understand until recently when I thought about how the two frame scenes in the painting, one, the Hopper image, and this is for those who don't know, the Hopper image is a reproduction of the Hopper 1930 painting Gas that the Chicago Art Institute chose as the marquee for their advertisement for this exhibit. So the juxtaposition between this Hopper painting and the contemporary street scene, and how these two reflect one another thematically, like mirrors looking into each other for infinity. But as I was trying to find the original poem in German and dialed up Rilke on Google, I came to this page. And as I explored this page, I noted this odd thing. This rating of the poem, 3.4 out of 5 stars, as if it were a used car, or as if we had to rate the quality of the donut we had just eaten. As if a poem could or should be rated, ranked, categorized. For what purpose? Under what criteria? And who's rating anyway? How many people turn away from this or some other poem because it only got 3 stars? How did we get here? The grand mystery of time and space before us, and the possibility that we are the only sentient beings in existence, and we are succumbed to counting widgets. Vignette number 3. The poet Dory Graham, in a recent interview, talked about how she understands the writing of poetry as not so much a description of a particular thing or concept, but more about a way of entering into something larger, more nebulous, and simultaneously more complex and meaningful. Poetry for her is not about rating scales or selling to us in our have it your way commercial culture, but a thing that seeks to enact upon its reader some change of soul or character, taking us to a realm where who we are, what we do, what we think and feel really matter. In this way, writing and reading poetry is an act and participation in something vital to our core sense of being. Graham suggests that this complexity was a kind of, quote, writing into that was different for every poet. Painting into, what does that mean? Rothko painted into. Though comprised of large color blotches, his paintings are not about color, but rather about exploring emotion, soul, experience. As he himself said, quote, "I became a painter because I wanted to raise painting to the level of poignancy of music and poetry." Abstraction often allows us a more direct route towards the painting into. But what about more realistic paintings, whose depiction of daily life may make them easy to read from the about lens, such as this painting by Edward Hopper? How easy is it to say that this is a pretty picture of a woman working at a movie theater, missing the more important painting into? Or this painting by Andrew Wyeth. Can we see beyond the bucolic and the beautiful interplay of light and dark? Can the uncareful viewer, maybe the modern viewer, who sometimes seems so easily distracted and in need of stars that rank poems, see the painting into in these works? See how the artist is concerned with some larger purpose that eludes the simple? Vignette number 4. I think of a painting, in part, as a kind of life form of its own. Not an object upon which we all look, but one that looks out towards us all. I'm often transfixed by thinking about paintings that are 200 or 300 years old and the things they have seen, the lives played out before them. The many owners, perhaps some ordinary people, perhaps some nobility of old, even modern dictators. What acts of love, what banalities, what brutalities have these paintings borne witness to as they've traveled through time and place, gathering the sounds of music, gathering different qualities of light and air, all of which become embedded into them. And if a painting is a kind of life form of its own, so too are my paintings. And I am something they encounter as they look outwards. Though I'm also their inception point. And this may seem convoluted, but there is a sense where I am making the painting, but the painting is also making me. And how does this happen? Every shade, each gradation of color you see in my works, I create using only 3 primary colors and, of course, black and white. The painstaking process of creating just one color, perhaps for the area less than the size of a postage stamp, can sometimes take up to 3 hours. And I know that sounds like a lot, but painting is really about layering of colors, like you might layer stained glass windows. And if one of those colors is off, then the 3 colors as you line them up won't make the color that you intend. Thus, I spend a great deal of time in front of each painting, months, even years. In fact, the title piece for this series, Shadows in the Cave, took me 3 years to complete. And spending so much time in front of a painting made me think about how much of my presence is attached to them. And in this way, I realized, and it seems obvious, but I don't think many of us really think about this, that for every painting we encounter at a museum, we need to realize that before that painting stood Rembrandt or Vermeer or some other artist. And but for the accident of time and space, we share that place. Here is where this artist was. Here is the ghost of this artist still, the shadow of their internal light, where the artist dreamt, suffered, raged, failed, succeeded, maybe even died. But where does this lead us? Another consequence for spending 10, 12 hours a day in front of a painting is a strange kind of loss of self into a kind of hallucinatory state. A space in which one becomes action, and in which I am both embodied and disembodied. My hands are my hands, and they are not my hands. My eyes are my eyes, and they are not my eyes. And I'm both doing and watching without any thought going through my mind whatsoever. All is pure presence and purpose. But pure presence cannot last. And at its end, I'm left keenly aware of its temporality and how this temporality makes all we do feel incredibly rare and important. This time spent in front of a painting, creating a painting, is to me a weaving of the past, present, into future, into form. All I have been, am, and am becoming is transformed into an object that encompasses and extends far beyond me. Final vignette. These days, the inundation of messaging that seeks to tell us how to think or what to think, how to be or define ourselves is so pervasive, literally omnipresent, such that you can, for example, often find men scrolling their cell phone feeds while urinating in public restrooms. And in that, I wonder at our ability to find and to know ourselves in a way that is at least partially mediated by something other than the noise of the social. But then, has it ever been any different? There has always been a tension between the innate reflective capacities we use to derive an understanding of the world that feels vital and real and of our own making, and how such understandings are transformed by the whims, desires, and narratives of others. Or are we in some kind of new time in which the power of technology to shape us is so absolute that we have lost agency despite believing we have more agency than ever before? Plato, of course, explored this conundrum in his allegory of the cave, a story in which he not only examines how humans can be deceived by false images, but how a turn into the light can enlighten previously deceived individuals. And yet, where Plato allows us an out, a space to grow and understand and learn, have we as a culture arrived at a place in which the very pathways through which we derive an understanding have been subverted? Or as the prescient 1960s French philosopher Guy Debord foresaw in his Society of the Spectacle, a moment in time in which, quote, commodity completes its colonization of social life, where we see the decline of being into having and having into merely appearing. I play with this concept in this series of paintings here at this show, and explicitly so in the title painting, Shadows in the Cave. I take from my subject matter what at first glance appears to be just another snapshot of Times Square. And in the logic of, oh, I've already seen that, it is a work that could too easily be dismissed. But the careful observer will see the painting into. Will see that what is this painting at first appears to be is not at all what is represented. I intentionally chose this theme as a means of exploring this very human predilection and the ways Times Square lends itself to an inversion of Plato's allegory of the cave. But let us back up for a moment. It was Plato's text, The Allegory of the Cave, that, for those of you who may have forgotten, is a meditation on how we derive meaning in our lives. The story consists of a group of people who are chained the story consists of a number of people who are chained within a cave for their entire life. They are chained in such a way that they can only look forward. Behind these people is a source of light coming from the cave's entrance. This light casts shadows from the outside world on the wall that is in front of them, and these shadows are all that they can see. In other words, their entire perception of reality is based upon what they interpret these shadows as dancing in front of them to mean. And of course, we see the trope that Plato was playing with here. These prisoners perceive a universe based not on what something actually is, but the reflection of the actual thing. A reflection that is only broken when a prisoner is freed and is able to turn to see for the first time the light and the objects as they really exist, rather than just the shadows of what they had perceived to be real. And we've all experienced this in our lives. This is part of human maturation, the ways we gain an understanding of our world only to have that understanding shift when we learn more or perceive our predicaments in greater depth. This interplay of thinking we know and then turning towards some light and finding out that all we thought we knew was just an illusion. In its purest sense, the turning towards the light is a metaphor for our constant struggle to comprehend truth, to make or find deeper meaning in the very mysterious experience of being sentient creatures. Though I think Plato also intended us to extend this metaphor as a means of questioning, perhaps, the very idea of reality and who gets to determine reality. And certainly contemporary culture has extended this metaphor to examine what this awareness of being means with regard to who gets to define such meaning, and how control of perception and meaning making is related to power and the control of society. But then there is also a way that an artist shapes the world without the desire to manifest some predetermined social narrative, but out of the depths of their own wild and mysterious flame. So let's turn again to the painting Shadows in a Cave. The way I play with Plato's allegory in this cave is by inverting his central metaphor. In my painting, it is the light itself, the light we look directly into, that is full of falsehoods. We are confronted with this duplicitous light in the form of the computer-generated billboards. A light that controls our perceptions in ways that obscures rather than illuminates our pursuit of reality or truth or meaning making, in the way it inundates us with a light that is about selling things. As Guy Debord speculated in a part of the decline of being into the pursuit of having, and having as it is transformed into merely appearing. Conversely, it is the shadows in my painting, those things that remain in mystery behind us, outside of the light, that seem to offer us a glimpse of what might actually be real beyond this corrupted light. And it is in these shadows that we encounter the second source that informed my creation of this work and these series of paintings. Werner Herzog's film Cave of Forgotten Dreams documents the finding of the Chavot cave paintings that were created some 40,000 years ago. Paintings not intended for us, and paintings for which we have absolutely no idea how to interpret what they might have meant to those who created them. These mysterious images are powerful for themselves and for the mystery of what they might represent, something that feels so primal. For me, there was a kind of saving of humanity in this mystery. The primalness of these images feels so real and so unmediated by modern media, precisely because they escape definitive interpretation. And I wanted to incorporate this mystery into the work as a kind of counterbalance for the way Plato would have us understand meaning making. We are sentient creatures, after all, not empty vessels. And the images that enter our consciousness are transformed by our own internal logistics into something new and more complex than intended by those who control them. The more I played with the idea of shadows in this way, the more things came out of me unbidden, in a flow of images discovered by free association that I placed into the painting. For example, I incorporated some of the Chavot cave drawings themselves, such as the horse. Or we might find transposition of the actual shadows of people whose images were burned into the ground even as their bodies were evaporated during the blast at Hiroshima. Or in a reflection on William Kentridge's exploration of the colonial extermination of the Herero people in South Africa, we find General von Trotha's Vernichtungsbefehl, or extermination order, an order that to me seems relevant to so many of our modern contexts. We might also find dreamlike fragmentation of beings as boundaries between forms are blurred in a way that speaks to a melting away from or into, that reminds me of the way we might sometimes wonder where one being begins and another ends, both in the corporeal and in the shadow. And even Michelangelo's Hand of God, which some equate to God giving Adam and humanity the gift and curse of knowing, finds its way into the shadows. Finally, this leads us to a third kind of allegory of the cave going on in my painting that reflects the acts of us here, or us at museums, or any time we stand before an artwork. We stand before a painting as if in a kind of cave, and we look at the light reflected off its surface. Like looking at shadows on the cave wall, we are forced to interpret what we see. Yet unlike the cave, there's no light source or object to be revealed behind us. We can only instead turn inwards to our own light, access our own interior space to find meaning or connection. The shadows in this cave ultimately being our own objects and relationships and the things we bring to or perhaps hide from the world. In this way, we all become part of the artwork, not just mine, but all artwork. And in return, we might see that we are all part of a much larger space, art space, we interpret as reality, or being, or society. As we all struggle to answer the questions, why am I here? And what does this mean? Thank you. So I don't know if there are any questions, but if someone does have questions, you can come down here. I'll have the mic over here. And I would also like to say, for those of you who are viewing this remotely, that I've put together a website that if you haven't already visited, I would invite you to do so at that address where the images for the paintings that are at this exhibit can be seen. And if you live close by, I would encourage you to at least try to come in because things are always a lot more vibrant in real life than they are in photographs, regardless of how good the photographs are. I can make it available to you. I think this is also being recorded, so it can. Yep. Well, I think I can hear you, so I'll repeat your question for the people who are watching remotely. Go ahead. Uh-huh. Yeah, so the question is about my technique and how I actually build the underdrawing and then what kind of, how I'm actually building the color structure as I lay out. So the underdrawing is a multi-step process, and I've actually moved from using sort of a fiberwood board to using aluminum, which is an even more complex process. But we'll start with a gessoed board, and then top of the gessoed board, we'll now add a layer of oil primer, because the gesso can actually absorb some of the oil from the oil plane at top, which can dry the oil plane out and create sort of like a dull kind of a dullness to the paint. And so a layer of oil gesso, and then I'll do the drawing on top of that. And the drawing will take a long time. It'll sort of percolate and go through multiple versions of the drawing, taking things, putting things in, taking things out. And then there's also, in the same kind of free association that I talked about in my paintings, going on at the drawing at the same time. Something will just come to me in my mind, and I'll put that into the painting, not necessarily always fully knowing why. But the building of colors, so I add a layer of red, and you'll see upstairs, I can show you some of the paintings I did before I started adding a layer of red and doing multi-step in terms of creating the glazing or the layering of oil paints. And you can see the difference in the color of the two paintings. One is so vibrant and reflective with color, and one is a little bit flatter. But once I've gotten a layer of red vermilion over the entire painting and let that dry, then I'll start coming in and working in section by section, and each painting will be different depending on how it's mapped out in terms of what can go where and what I can paint and let dry while I paint another section and then potentially go back over top of things that are dry. But glazing essentially is about layering different colors. So I want to arrive at one color, but to get to that color, I have to layer 3 or 4 colors on top of each other to arrive at the one color that ultimately I will see at the end. So it's like taking stained glass window really and sort of layering it on top of each other, which can be really difficult because you actually don't know the color you're going to create until you put that final layer on top. And sometimes it's successful and sometimes it's not, and you just have to scrape it off and start again. But the beauty of that is because people don't realize is that oil paint is really pigment trapped in oil, which is a translucent thing. And so as you're layering them, it's really, really like stained glass window. The light comes and penetrates through, and as it goes through all 3 or 4 layers that you have and comes back out, it disperses a much more vibrant and rich kind of color than if it were just one layer on top of that that's a singular paint. The Dutch masters used to do a lot of that work. So very time consuming. Yep. That's a great question. I mean, traditionally, a lot of Rembrandt, a lot of other oil painters would do sort of a brown layer, and some painters even do a black layer. And there's certainly, I think, a way that creates a kind of atmosphere that you really enjoy as a painter, as an individual, just for whatever reason in my personal makeup. But in terms of myself and using red, I don't know. I'd have to think about that. All I can say is I really like the red and the quality that it creates for the rest of the painting underneath. Yes. So the question is, how does photography play a role in my work? And the answer is yes. I mean, I'm constantly, and so I don't always have a camera with me, so sometimes I'm just memorizing something, and then I might go home at the end of the day and sketch it out, or literally write it out. But sometimes I will go out with a camera and just capture things that appear before me in life. I mean, I really do like to find things that are real in the world, and then take that realness back to the studio and transform it as I work on a painting. But, and I will, sometimes I'll find something and I know there's something there, but I don't know quite what it is. And I might take several sketches or several photographs of that thing in and around at different times of day or something like that, and bring those back in and look at them all and sort of mull on them in the studio and think, is there something here that I can create or isn't there? Okay. Yes. They start that way, yes. And I actually think that's really important because I like that sense of realism, something that's really happened in the world. But as I go through the process, as I said, things will be added to them. They come from me or come from other people. Yes. Tell you more about the infinity. For that particular painting or in general? Okay. So for that painting in Empire, and then maybe, I don't know how well I described this in my presentation, but it occurred to me after the painting of that so much of what that painting is framing. So on the one hand, we start with the frame of the advertisement for the art exhibit at the Chicago Institute of Art that was the Hopper, the Wood, the O'Keeffe exhibit. But even within that frame, there were 3 panels that are sort of frames of themselves. So you get this idea of a frame being this sign first. It's sort of, you know, as you look at it in more detail, it's kind of breaking down in and of itself. So there's like a life within this frame that's framed in 3 different ways and sort of 3 different stages of decrepitude. But then there's a way that frame, the Hopper painting, relates to what's outside of it in the real world, which is a scene that's very similar to what you see in the Hopper painting, which is the man pumping gas in the 1930s during the Great Depression in the United States. But on the outside of that is a homeless man who's on the street in almost the same pose. And this was actually something that was straight out of life. Like I was walking home one day, my wife was at a conference, and this billboard was outside of the hotel, and I was entering the hotel. I turned around, and there was this man standing in front of that painting in exactly that pose, and I was like, wow. And I just, you know, grabbed the iPhone and took like 5 or 10 snapshots and put that together. But as I finished the painting, I realized, and I didn't think of this intentionally when I put the infinity symbol there, but these 2 images reflect upon each other in a mirror image in so many ways. I mean, the homeless man and the man during the Great Depression bear a sort of brotherhood in terms of being down in their luck and struggling economically. But then there's also a way that they reflect each other in opposition, in the sense that, you know, the Hopper paintings of a white man who is sort of the prima ballerina of the scene, and we go to the museum to see him, but on the street is a homeless black man. And so how is he outside of the frame of the art, in his own frame in the world? And how do those 2 speak to each other? And then you can think about, you know, relationships of class or relationships of race in the United States, and how those could be 2 mirrors that are sort of infinitely reflecting each other back and forth. One of the interesting things thinking about that painting and another couple paintings upstairs, and that relates to the stagecoach wagon wheel, I thought last night, is that in the Empire painting, the only way to escape the frame is through a void on the right-hand side. And you'll be able to see that when you go up and look at the painting later on. As if there is this dimension where the wagon wheel went, that you, the viewer, can escape this infinite reflection. And there's something about that and the grander sense of infinity that means something to me, that I think is part of what is in the background of my thinking when I'm creating artwork, that there is this forever unknown that allows us this ability to continue on. I mean, you could imagine a world where everything was known, everything codified and scripted. I mean, how boring would that be? What would be left to do? But it's because we can continually ask questions, understand things, but then in understanding things, continue to find this mystery that allows us to keep going. So there's a way of this, having the void or the out, or this is space that is reflected by infinite casts of how our universe is constructed, also feels really important to me. No. The question is, have I completed the series Shadows in the Cave? No. There are several more planned paintings that speak to this. Yeah. Why? Is there a reason for asking that question? Got it. So the question was whether this show is complete, or whether there are more paintings coming. If there are more paintings coming, how do they speak to the paintings that are here? I think the paintings that I've envisioned to complete this series are very much in line with what this series currently is, though they may extend out more into scenes of nature, or also just scenes of individuals in more sort of portraiture style. But I do have another envisioned series that will be quite different, that will be like a burst into the light. but you'll have to wait for that. Yeah. I think the world is always both light and dark at the same time. And I think I find beauty in both, and I think both create each other. The light creates the dark creates the light. Yeah, I think that's what I would say to that. Great question, though. Yes. So the question is, when do I choose the painting is done? So there's two different ending points. The first ending point is when the master sketch is done. So when the master sketch is done, I have the sense that this is complete. I know what I want to paint, and I know how it's going to happen. And things may actually get added as I begin adding colors to it. But once I have that master sketch done and I have the sense of it being done, I can sort of really envision the end and kind of let go of this idea that it's still developing. And as you put the colors on and things change as you put the colors on, I really, the kind of changes that happen there are fairly minimal and really have to do with whether the colors are really communicating what I had intended them to communicate based on what was drawn as part of the underdrawing. So when I finish with the color, I'm done. Like I don't have to like go back and look at it and think, do I need to add something or take something away? But part of the benefits or the consequences of taking so long to create a painting and spending so much time is you get a long time to think about it. So, while you're mixing paint for 3 hours and listening to music, you're kind of like, well, then you might make changes as you go along there. The question is, work on just one painting at a time? Typically, yes, though I've started to work on 3 now. I want to up the speed of my production. I would enjoy working on more painting than at a time. Just oftentimes it's a matter of time for me, unfortunately. Yes. The answer is yes, every day that I'm sitting down to look at it. Every time I look at the drawing, I see something new. And every time, as you build color structure on, it changes continually. So like what you've painted, in the next day, you paint something that changes what you've already painted, which also changes the way you see the rest of the painting. But I think the fascinating answer to your question for me is how I see through new things once the painting's completed that I didn't intend to be there at all. Like that infinity symbol. I'm literally, that was one of the last things that went into that. And that was something spur of the moment. And I wasn't at all thinking of the way these two scenes reflected against each other. And it wasn't until later on that I said, why did I put that in there? And then I started to see these things in the painting. So, that's one of the exciting things about me. Like I said at the beginning, it's really what you see that's so exciting to me, because what you bring to it is just as important as what I put into it. So yeah. Yeah, no, that's a great question and a great idea. So the answer is no, because I've barely put my work out there. I've sort of been a hermit and a recluse on that. But so this is the beginning of that. So I will take that as a great idea to do moving forward. How long have you got? Is it, someone have a question up there? Oh. Yes. That's, okay. So repeat the first one. My gosh. So that's a great question. Trial and error. I will actually play with it depending on how the painting's originally conceived. Like, but if I have a photograph of it, I may broadcast a photograph of an image I want to develop on a wall, and working with my partner, I'll just sort of zoom in and out and try different sizes and just play with it until we find a size or that seems like it really fits what it is I'm trying to say, and go with that size. And the second question, how long? So part of the reason, as an artist, you have to work a day job until something else happens. So one of the challenges is, finding the hours after work or spending all weekend doing the painting. But typically, nowadays I'm working much faster. So I could probably, if I were working full time, sort of 10 hours a day, 7 days a week, I could get a painting done in 3 months time. But, and that sounds bad, but, so it was, they say Da Vinci took 16 years to complete the Mona Lisa. So, and then there's 23 layers of paint that are worked on top of each other, which creates this sort of amazing, amazing luminescence. So. All right, well, so I think we should go upstairs and look at some paintings. Thank you very much.